Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. Catholics around the world are mourning the death of Pope Francis. He died on Easter Monday at the age of 88. For some Indigenous Canadians, Francis embodied a new type of pope, one focused on truth, justice, and healing. Inuit leaders are paying tribute to a legacy they say will resonate with people for years to come. One of the Pope's most pivotal actions came in 2022. He apologized for the Catholic Church's role in Canada's residential schools. He stopped in Iqaluit to meet with survivors of sexual abuse by members of the church.
Ultimately, the relationship that we have with the Catholic Church is complicated, but I don't have complicated feelings towards Pope Francis. He set out to work on reconciliation. He, I would imagine, pushed back against his own church policies and leadership within the Vatican. And for that, I'll always be thankful.
Obed says he hopes the next pope will carry on the progress already made for Indigenous people. That includes respect for human rights and working on the outstanding calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Here he is with more.
I always worry when leaders change that there's an amnesia for the progress that's been made under the last leadership. And I would imagine with the Catholic Church, it's just the same, is that you could have a wildly different pope with different principles and policies. I do hope that the progress that we have made will be continued through just focusing on the respect for our human rights, the legacy of the apology, and just the support for the work that's undertaken by the Canadian Council on Catholic Bishops to really spearhead the reconciliation work that happens here in Canada. We still have a lot of work to do with the Catholic Church in the Vatican, but a lot of that work needs administrative help. A lot of the ability for a progressive relationship moving forward does depend upon the next pope and their willingness to continue this work.
Pope Francis was known for his compassion, humility, and focus on global unity. Chris Brown takes a closer look at his legacy and the impact of his leadership.
For Canadians, and especially Indigenous Canadians, Pope Francis may be remembered most for this trip to Alberta in the summer of 2022. I humbly beg forgiveness for the evil committed by so many Christians against Indigenous peoples, he said, delivering an historic apology for the damage inflicted by church-run residential schools and the evils of colonialism. The emotional moment, long sought by residential school survivors, would be one of the progressive Pope's crowning achievements.
I think from the moment he stepped out on the balcony, we knew that the tectonic plates had shifted.
Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, the first pope ever from the Americas and the first from outside Europe in nearly 1,300 years, carried immense expectations from many demanding change and a more modern institution.
I began to just be fascinated.
Tina Beattie is a theologian and a former professor of Catholic studies in London.
He's lived as humbly as it's possible for a pope to live. And he's put to shame some of the grandiose lifestyles of some of the men in the Vatican. So all in all, that first night was euphoric. Euphoria, of course, doesn't last.
Francis would win accolades for his tough talk condemning sexual abuse in the church. He held summits, met survivors, and made apologies. His messages to gay people also sounded remarkably conciliatory for an institution so resistant to change. He told reporters traveling with him on a flight, "If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge?" Francis used his profile to try to make the world pay attention to the plight of migrants in the Mediterranean, the persecution of Rohingya Muslims, and to heal the deep wounds of civil war in African nations such as South Sudan. But victims of sexual abuse complained Francis's words weren't backed by actions, that abusers continued to be protected.
I think he failed to grasp the real savage problem of the abuse crisis.
As for women, Tina Beattie says Francis saw them in a maternal way, not as equals to men, with too few women appointed to powerful jobs in the church.
But when I hear and read what he says about women, I think, but you haven't listened. You haven't heard anything.
For the first time in history, Francis had to share the Vatican with his predecessor, Emeritus Pope Benedict, who resigned, but whose conservative views clashed with Francis's.
That contributed, of course, to the culture wars and to the sort of schisms that opened up in the church. So I think he made the best of what he must have seen was a very awkward situation.
Francis attempted to create a more inclusive Catholic Church and broaden its appeal, but he also triggered fierce internal debates. His achievements will now either be consolidated or overturned by his successor. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
As you heard earlier, Pope Francis made a historic trip to Nunavut in 2022, and he is also being remembered this week for other stops on that Canadian visit in Alberta and Quebec. Melissa Francois has that part of the story.
Pope Francis apologized to Indigenous communities in 2022 when he visited the country for his penitential pilgrimage in an effort to heal what the Roman Catholic Church did to Indigenous people. Over the span of a century, about 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend residential schools. Most of them were run by the Catholic Church.
El perdón, la sanación y la reconciliación.
Francis said he was sorry that members of the church participated in the abuse and cultural assimilation of the different communities back then. The former Grand Chief of the Cree Nation of Iuichi in northern Quebec went to Rome to advise Pope Francis prior to his visit in Canada.
I was one of the individuals who helped coordinate the elders that were able to meet him in Quebec City, and he took the extra time there. He really accommodated them. In fact, I'd go as so far to say that the Pope was more open in ensuring the inclusivity of his audience than those members of the Catholic Church. He really wanted to make this space and ensure that people could be heard. I saw that firsthand with my own eyes, and I really appreciated the approach that he had.
The Grand Chief of the Wendat Nation in the Quebec City area says Francis contributed in the opening of a difficult dialogue and that the Catholic Church needs to do more.
Par exemple, permettre une plus grande facilité d'accès.
We would like to have an easier access to the archive kept by the institution, he says. The National Assembly of First Nations has the same request.
They still have our artifacts. We have to bring our artifacts back home to Canada. That's one step that the Pope had committed to us. We've been working on that with his office for months now, and we don't want that work to stop. And at the same time, we've lost an ally today.
And they hope to have a new ally at the Vatican to pursue the reconciliation efforts. Melissa Francois, CBC News, Montreal.
So what comes next? Cardinals are meeting in Rome for those next steps. They've yet to set a date to start picking a new leader of the Catholic Church, but it will likely happen in early May. Ellen Morrow tells us how it all works.
The process for picking a new pope to lead more than 1 billion Catholics around the world comes down to an ancient voting ritual cloaked in secrecy. It's called conclave, and here's how it works. After a pope dies or resigns, there's a period called sede vacante, roughly time of the empty throne in Latin. As the faithful gather in St. Peter's Square to say goodbye to the previous pope, top-ranking clergymen, known collectively as the College of Cardinals, descend on Vatican City from around the world. They're the ones who get to decide the new pope when conclave begins, usually 2 to 3 weeks after the start of sede vacante. Conclave dates back to the 1200s. 1492 was the first time it was held in the Sistine Chapel, the site of all conclaves since 1878. The cardinals voting under the famous ceilings painted by Michelangelo. The chapel is located just beside St. Peter's Basilica, where the Pope leads the Catholic Church. There's an intense security operation to prepare. The chapel swept for any illicit recording or listening devices before the cardinals arrive. Once inside, they must all swear an oath of secrecy. Any leaks risk excommunication from the church. And this is where conclave gets its name. It comes from the Latin for "with a key," referring to a locked room. The cardinals are locked behind the doors of the chapel with no contact with the outside world. They can only leave the chapel at night to sleep at their Vatican accommodation before it all starts again each morning. For centuries, the church's new leader has been chosen from the pool of cardinals, and there's usually a few rumored favorites going into conclave. But the cardinals can vote for whoever they want, as long as they're a baptized Catholic man. And here are the rules. Only cardinals under the age of 80 are allowed to participate in the vote. The cardinals vote once on the first day. On following days, there are 4 rounds of voting each, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, until a new pope is chosen by a 2/3 majority. It took just 5 rounds to elect Pope Francis. Pope Benedict even shorter, with just 4 rounds. And Pope John Paul II was elected in 2 days after 8 rounds of voting. The ballot papers are anonymous and look something like this: small rectangles that say in Latin, "I elect as Supreme Pontiff," with a spot for a name to be written in. The cardinals put their ballots in an urn, the votes are counted and read aloud. Then this comes in. After a count, the ballots are burned in a stove connected to a chimney on the roof of the chapel. Those famous smoke signals are the world's only way of knowing what happened. Black smoke means no new pope yet. The voting and the uncertainty for Catholics continues. But if there's white smoke, Catholics in St. Peter's Square and around the world celebrate as a new pope has been chosen. This was the joyful reaction to the election of Pope Francis in 2013.
We are so happy and so enjoyed that we are here now.
It usually takes less than an hour after the white smoke before this announcement. Habemus Papam. Habemus Papam, or we have a pope. And after all that, the world hears from the new leader of the Catholic Church for the first time.
Buonasera.
He blesses the crowd,
Et Spiritu Sancto.
and a new papal reign begins.
Thousands of documents related to residential schools are now available to the public. They're part of a database called Residential Schools: The Hidden Stories. In it are letters from parents, reports of abuse, and records of serious disease outbreaks. The Investigative Journalism Foundation launched the database. It's free to access on the foundation's website. Bethany Lindsay is with the Investigative Journalism Foundation. While exploring the records, she discovered an alarming item from Nunavut's copper mine tent hostel in the 1950s, where children were kept in fragile tents in the cold.
The actual bishop for the Anglican Church, which was responsible for this hostel, had repeatedly said, this isn't safe or adequate for children to be housed in. Local Inuit families are not happy about it. We can't keep going. And the people who were running the school, the government officials who were responsible for it, just kept brushing him off, saying he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Support is available for anyone affected by residential schools. A National Indian Residential School crisis line can be reached 24 hours a day by calling the number on your screen. That is 1-866-925-4419. Construction of Nunavut's first addictions and trauma treatment center is underway. It's called Akusariak. Neil McDonald is a project manager overseeing construction of the center. He says everything is on schedule and construction is expected to be finished by winter.
We're about a year and a half into construction now. There was a lot of excavation that had to get going with bedrock and whatnot, northern conditions, sea lifting up materials. And right now we have, would say, a completed building envelope.
Workers are currently creating air and weather barriers for insulation and protection. Significant excavation and bedrock work has already been completed.
The collaboration between the client team, our contractor that we have on the site, and our design team has been very open and collaborative throughout the project. So, which is why we're still on track to meet our opening.
The goal of the treatment center is to take the burden of support off of family, neighbors, and co-workers. The opening date has yet to be determined by the Nunavut Department of Health.
The claims period for 2 classes in the First Nations Child and Family Services and Jordan's Principal Settlement is now open.
First Nations children who were removed from their homes on reserve between April 1st, 1991 and March 31st, 2022, and their caregiving parents and caregiving grandparents can now submit a claim for compensation.
There are free supports to help you fill out your form.
And mental health and wellness supports if you need them.
Learn more and submit your claim at fnchildclaims.ca.
Are you an aspiring songwriter? Do you want your song to be part of Nunavut's cultural heritage? Let's celebrate 10 years of Inuktitut songwriting with this year's themes, Piluk sa Tilunga and Inuit Sanasimayangit. For contest rules and more information about Kilo 2025, visit www.gov.nu.ca. The deadline for submissions is May 5, 2025.
The federal election is on Monday, April 28th. Are you planning to vote? Check your voter information card or visit elections.ca to find out where and when to vote. Polls are open for 12 hours. Don't forget to bring accepted ID. If you're not registered to vote, you can register at your assigned polling station. It's our vote.
For the official information you need to vote, visit elections.ca or call 1-800-463-6868.
The Northwest Territories government is throwing the territory's diamond mines a lifeline. The industry says it's been hit hard by a roughly 25% drop in the retail price of diamonds over the last few years. The GNWT will temporarily reduce the property taxes paid by the mines. That is an $11 million tax break. It's also allowing the Ekati and Gacho Kwe mines use of a $4 million green fund. And it's doubling the number of local diamond valuations. It says that will get diamonds to market more quickly. The GNWT says these measures will help the mines and protect the local economy from sudden shock. Here's NWT Finance Minister Caroline Wozniak talking about the $11 million property tax break.
It's just a 1 year for the current fiscal year that we're in. It's a lot, but the reality is if you've got over 1,000 Northerners currently employed directly at the mines, not to mention however many hundreds or probably thousands more in the supportive industries, everything from the airline charters to hospitality, stepping in to say, look, we know that the economy right now is in a pretty tough spot. The world economy is very uncertain. Uncertainty doesn't do well for diamonds. So, taking a loss on 11 million versus the uncertainty that we'd be facing and the impacts of that's really the balance that we're looking at.
Earlier this month, the mining companies asked the GNWT for help. All 3 NWT diamond mines reported losses last year. Mining is the largest private sector contributor to the NWT's economy. A project to connect the Yukon to the BC power grid is underway. $40 million has been earmarked for the project, but it won't happen overnight.
we're probably looking, around 10 years out. There's certain things we could expedite around that. I think if we can look at permitting and expediting the permitting, obviously the engineering, design, construction, I think could be sped up. The one area where we don't want to speed up and we want to take time is really around the First Nations partnerships and making sure that First Nations are involved. We fully expect this to be a First Nations owned line, and the early conversations we've had is really just to building the relationships and fostering a partnership to work alongside with the nations to bring this project forward.
That was Gary Gazankis, president of the Yukon Development Corporation. Water levels across the Northwest Territories have been lower than normal in recent years. In 2024, some barges were unable to make it up the Mackenzie River into the Sawtoo. With spring now underway, the NWT's Department of Environment and Climate Change has released its seasonal water outlook. The report includes data on snowpack, river ice, and current water levels across the region. So far, signs are pointing towards more favorable conditions this year.
As a group, our hydrology group meets with Marine Transport Services every month. So we give them the up-to-date hydrological information that we have from all our different sources. And so based on what they're seeing relative to normal water levels, they'll take all that information that we give them, and then they'll make a decision based off of that. What I can say is that there's a lot more water in the system compared to 2024. We have seen a better snowpack so far this year, and pre-existing water levels, like I mentioned, they're slightly better on the lake. So there's more water in the system compared to 2024.
Are we anywhere close to normal, though, when it comes to the Mackenzie River?
When it comes to Great Slave Lake, we're still about 25 centimeters below normal. So it's up to them, like how far below normal those water levels have to be for them to barge. Like that's pieces of information that they'll get from the Coast Guard and from, the captains that drive the barges. So,
but we're looking much better this year.
Yeah, definitely a little bit better.
We'll wait and see.
This spring, hydrologists will be closely monitoring how quickly snow melts and how the river ice breaks up. They're also watching for warm weather and heavy rain, especially in places like Nahanni Butte and Fort McPherson, where conditions could shift quickly. The city of Yellowknife is looking at selling green spaces for development. It's raising new questions about how many people live in Yellowknife and what the future population might look like. The city hired a consulting firm to analyze the data, and not everyone agrees on the numbers. Jocelyn Chappelle explains why.
Have you ever wondered how much Yellowknife is growing? The city hired consulting and design firm FBM to look into those numbers. The firm originally said the city's population had grown 25% in 8 years. They have since clarified that number is closer to 15%. Jeff Baricello is the NWT's territorial statistician. Their data shows a 5% population growth for that same time frame.
If you're going to look at the population change between 2016 and 2024, it would be best to use our population estimates.
Kieran Hunt is FBM lead consultant for the study. He says one of his numbers was off, but that they stand behind their findings.
The recommendations and implications will largely be the same.
Hunt says they look at population growth for a city's future development needs, but noted employment numbers and available industrial space data plays a large role. The study found the city will need around 600,000 square feet for industrial developments to support future growth. FBM's population estimate for 2034 is 26,339 residents. Baricello says they will release their population forecasts later this year. Jocelyn Chappelle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Transportation issues are behind the delay in getting much-needed portable classrooms to Colville Lake NWT. The portables have been built and ready for a while now, but so far neither the GNWT nor the contractor has figured out how to get them to the community. As Nadir Hashmi reports, the portables are still sitting in Edmonton.
It's been almost 3 years since Cube Construction was awarded the contract to build 2 portable classrooms and a portable washroom. The contract also required Cube to deliver them to Colville Lake. But the GNWT says the contractor didn't finish the portables in time for the 2024 winter road season. They say this year Cube Construction backed out during the final stages of planning the delivery. But Cube says there's a bit more to the story. Ashraf Al-Turehi is the company's CEO. In an email to CBC, he says the GNWT requested a specific width for the portables. He says they're too wide for the winter road. Combined with the road weight limits, he says transporting them became too challenging. The territory, however, says the portables fall within the allowable dimensions for the Mackenzie Valley Winter Road. They say the contractor is still responsible for delivery. It's now working on a solution, but the units likely won't make it to Colville Lake until the 2026 Winter Road season. In the meantime, residents say they are frustrated and disappointed as students continue to deal with overcrowded classrooms.
They keep saying next year, and it's still not here.
Olia says she's not that optimistic, as the delivery has already been postponed twice, and getting regular updates from the GNWT is also a problem.
We asked for a couple of updates throughout the winter, and we haven't gotten one. Just the update to tell us that it wasn't going to make it in on the winter road.
Olias adds that they desperately need a bigger space and just a proper environment to teach the kids in. Nadir Hashmi, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Many Canadians are rethinking travel to the United States this summer, focusing instead on exploring their own country. And the Yukon is hoping to cash in on those homegrown visitors. 2024 was a record year for tourism in the Yukon. Visitors spent more than $400 million. And domestic and international travel is already up for 2025. Now, the Yukon's tourism minister says the government is looking to lure Canadians who had planned on visiting Alaska.
They come to the Yukon, they have a great time, they go to Alaska and they think, okay, and they come back and they say, hey, it was the Yukon all along that we really loved. And there is a lot of that authentic feel here, and so we'll play to people's heartstrings that way.
The Yukon already targets much of its advertising at Canadians. About 60% of the marketing budget is spent on domestic media. And that is Northbeat for tonight. One quick note before we go. CBC North in Yellowknife is hosting an NWT Federal Election Forum that airs live tonight. That is from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Mountain Time on CBC Radio 1. You can join the CBC's Hillary Bird as all four NWT candidates debate the issues that matter the most to you. You can also catch it live at cbc.ca/north or stream it on YouTube. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
By voting NDP, you've helped to build this country. Healthcare for families, pensions for workers. And even when we're not in power, do Democrats get things done for people, like dental care? It's because of you. Because you vote NDP, we can make life better for ordinary people, not the billionaires, and stand up to any government that wants to cut the things that we value. Vote NDP and make sure we're there, fighting for our kind of Canada, fighting for you.